Responding to the budget debate, DPM Heng Swee Keat lays out plans for Singapore in the post-COVID-19 world.
A British man will spend 2 weeks in jail for breaching his stay-home notice to meet his Singaporean fiancée.
With shocking acts of maid abuse coming to light this week, we'll discuss what can be done to prevent such cases from recurring.
5:30 p.m. here in Singapore. Welcome to The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay.
I'm Haryanto Diman. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode.
Starting his budget roundup speech, Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat thanked members of Parliament for highlighting issues like the importance of Singapore's reserves, as well as the need to act to help Singaporeans in the changing political and economic landscape.
I want to situate Budget 2021 and Singapore's future within the larger forces sweeping the world. Singapore sits at a crossroads between the East and the West. It is a position that we have harnessed to maintain our relevance to the world amid the flux and changing tides of global political and economic developments. But we cannot take our standing in the world for granted. It is something that we have to painstakingly maintain as the world and region evolve so that we remain relevant.
DPM Heng also remarked that some members, quote, argued selectively without acknowledging the broader impact of COVID-19 and the outcomes of the government's decisive interventions.
He responded to a leader of the opposition, Pritam Singh's call for an increase in the scrutiny of expenditure and invited the Workers' Party to do the same themselves.
Mr. Pritam Singh asked that we increase the scrutiny of expenditures and to set up an independent parliamentary budget office to enhance such scrutiny. I'm glad Mr. Singh agrees with the need to be prudent and accountable in our spending. And in fact, it will be very helpful if each time Mr. Singh or his colleagues ask the government to spend more, to give us their estimates of how much it will cost and how they will fund it. But instead, the Workers' Party has called on the government to spend $20 million to set up an independent parliamentary budget office to do this job for them. Even as they call for more scrutiny on government expenditure, we invite them to hold themselves to the same scrutiny. As I've outlined, prudence and stewardship are core values of this government. We hold ourselves to high standards and work hard to ensure that our spending is cost-effective to deliver the best value for money for taxpayers. We have achieved world-leading outcomes while running one of the leanest governments in the world. We are always looking to achieve better outcomes with less, and we will say more about this during MOF's COS. In addition to independent audits by the Auditor General's Office, we also have parliamentary scrutiny of our spending through the Estimates and Public Accounts Committee. The Workers' Party is represented in both of them. Such an office will be a wasteful duplication of these functions.
Mr. Heng also touched on alternatives to the GST hike to fund current spending needs. This after several members had asked that the government consider other forms, like Foo Mee Har's suggestion of a one-off wealth tax.
But DPM Heng said imposing such levies will not replace the need to increase the GST.
Let me reiterate. We do tax wealth, and we have been raising wealth taxes over the years. This is not the question. Rather, the practical question has always been how to design wealth taxes moves to ensure that they are effective. First, we must ensure that the tax cannot be easily avoided, especially by those with more means. Otherwise, it will not achieve the social equity and fairness that we want. Second, we must balance between progressivity and staying competitive to grow our economy. Singapore must remain attractive to those who work hard and those who invest to create good jobs. Because growing the economy is the most sustainable way to generate revenue and raise our standards of living. Third, the move should add to our revenue resilience and adequacy. The government will continue to study wealth tax options.
Well, StraitsTimes.com has all the details from Mr. Heng's speech, and the ministries will be laying out their respective expenditure for 2021.
But earlier today, in response to several parliamentary questions on the erroneous clearing of the Kranji woodland site, Trade and Industry Minister said an environmental impact assessment was initially not needed when planning began in 2019.
But in August 2020, the National Parks Board required environmental studies to be conducted due to new changes in the building plan. Land developer JTC, though, conducted further clearing without approval between end December 2020 and January 13th this year.
Between end December 2020 and 13 January 2021, the contractor conducted further clearing without approval. These areas are etched in red in page 14 of the handout and amount to a total of 4.5 hectares. There are ongoing investigations on why the contractor did so, since there was no approval. I seek the House understanding that I cannot say more at this point in time, pending the outcome of these investigations. The further land clearing by the contractor was discovered by JTC's project manager on 13th of January 2021 during his site visit. All clearance works on site were suspended immediately and remain suspended today. I have confidence that they will look at this thoroughly, learn the lessons, and improve. Because when I speak to the officers in JTC and NParks, and when I look at them in the eye, I know. I have see in their eyes the fire in their belly that they want to put this right.
National Development Minister Desmond Lee reassured the House that steps are being taken to strengthen the environmental impact assessment framework.
We are currently working to implement the following enhancements which we had announced publicly last October. Namely, A, increase the vigor or rigor of our environmental studies through a set of biodiversity impact assessment guidelines. B, strengthen our enforcement regime through the amended Wildlife Act. C, build up local expertise on ecological matters. And D, make all environmental study reports publicly available unless there are security considerations. In our discussions with the nature community last year, we had identified several other ways to further strengthen the EIA process, beyond what we had just rolled out in October. We will develop a more comprehensive picture of the island-wide ecosystem and connectivity so that we can better consider how the specific sites connect to our nature cores, buffers, and corridors.
Well, Mr. Lee also shared that processes will be science-based. The government is reviewing as well whether it would be better to centralize the management of EIA consultants and explore how technology can be better used to strengthen project management.
When it comes to deciding on Singapore's 5th or 6th generation Prime Minister, race should not be used as a trump card or disqualifying criterion. MP for Holland Bukit Timah GRC Christopher D'Souza expressed this wish in Parliament today.
Instead, when evaluating a candidate to lead the government, more robust factors like character, abilities, values and experience could be considered.
If there is a Singaporean Chinese candidate of the right age and with the right character and the right skill set, making him the best man for the job, he should be chosen for the job. If there is a Singaporean of a minority race of the right age and with the right character and right skill set to be the best man for the job, then he should be chosen for the job. When it comes to leadership of government, we should not discount anybody because of their race, but instead evaluate the candidate based on who is best for the job. I hold this belief. I know many in my age group and younger hold this belief firmly too.
Well, Mr. D'Souza also said a woman with outstanding leadership ability should not be discounted either, pointing to German Chancellor Angela Merkel as an example.
In yet another case of maid abuse, a 51-year-old woman was convicted today of 2 counts of abusing her Myanmar maid. The attacks left the victim with bruises and a loss of hearing in her left ear.
The woman was acquitted of 2 other counts of maid abuse as the judge found that the maid's evidence in these instances had not been, quote, unusually convincing. The woman will be sentenced on March 17th.
Meanwhile, following the harrowing maid abuse case which resulted in the death of Myanmar national Piang Ngai Don, the government is carrying out a thorough review to put an end to any form of abuse to foreign domestic workers.
Speaking to the media yesterday, Manpower Minister Josephine Teo outlined 3 particular areas in this review, namely safeguards against abusive employers, the reporting system for doctors who periodically examine domestic helpers, and a look at how the community can play a role in flagging possible abuse.
Lawyer with Tito Isaac and co Justin Chan is here to weigh in on what can be tightened as part of the government's review. Justin, this week alone, 3 separate cases of maid abuse were reported, indicating that perhaps the existing safeguards are not adequate enough. Now, when it comes to protecting the safety of our foreign domestic workers, what gaps in the system need to be given immediate attention?
I wouldn't say that there are gaps. As far as the law is concerned, I think we have a legal system that has very harsh penalties for maid abusers. For example, Section 73 of the Penal Code already provides for an accelerated punishment for anything involving a domestic worker. And Section 323, which is the punishment for voluntary causing hurt, carries an imprisonment for a term of 3 years. 325, which is for voluntary causing grievous hurt, carries a punishment term, jail term, of up to 10 years. So as you can see, it's really quite harsh. And also, whenever we have a harsh and applicable law, there is a system of deterrence which operates as a safeguard. But in terms of the systems, I suppose the systems can be strengthened a little bit. And this is probably from the ground up. At the time that you, the requirements, for example, for hiring a maid may be stricter. And it may be, for example, before you take a practical driving test, you have to pass your theory test first. So perhaps some form of an exam, a compulsory exam, which you must pass as a prerequisite before you can hire a domestic helper.
Justin, so as part of the government review that Mrs. Teo brought up yesterday, what laws can be introduced that will strengthen the framework to prevent future maid abuse?
I think that something that needs to be addressed is the doctor's reporting procedure. I think that this was a problem encountered in the Miss Piang abuse case. It may be suitable to introduce some kind of mandatory reporting system where once a doctor sees a certain suite of ailments and injuries, for example, malnutrition, contusions, cuts, things of that nature, it must be mandatory for them to report that matter. Also, there is a reporting system of doctors can take the force of law if necessary and make it mandatory through the force of law.
Sometimes the role of third parties like neighbors, relatives, friends even, they are vital in maid abuse cases coming to light. But what more can be done, you think, to instill a more proactive approach in the public flagging these cases? I mean, already the review will address the involvement of the community and partner organizations.
Well, I think at this point in time, we are very proactive. I personally have seen many cases where a person is charged not because the maid herself has made a complaint, but because for some social media source, through, of course, the social media user has reported that there's this instance of maid abuse. So I think on that score, we're quite good. But the thing that I seem to observe is that there is a lack of a monitoring process. So in terms of monitoring, I just wonder whether it would be suitable for perhaps a relevant person, make it mandatory for a relevant person to visit the household to ascertain whether there's actually maid abuse that is happening. I think a yearly visit may be suitable. The Office of the Public Guardian, for example, has a form of visit like that when they go to visit households where a person is unable to make her own decisions and she has deputy or deputies looking after her. So perhaps there's a system that we can copy and amend accordingly to apply to the domestic helper context.
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us, Justin. That was Justin Chan, a senior partner at law firm Tito Isaac & Co.
An update on the COVID-19 situation here. 13 new cases were confirmed today, all imported.
They've already been placed on stay-home notice upon arrival in Singapore, and more details will be released later tonight.
A Briton who breached his stay-home notice to meet his fiancée was sentenced today. He will serve 2 weeks in jail and be fined $1,000. To recap the case, Nigel Skea was quarantining at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, but he snuck out of his room to meet his Singaporean fiancée, who was staying at a different level but wasn't serving SHN at the time. The fiancée, now Skea's wife, was also sentenced today to 1 week's jail.
The Food, Drinks and Allied Workers Union has successfully unionized 12 cupcakes after the current and former owners of the local pastry chain came under fire for underpaying foreign staff. The union will work closely with 12 Cupcakes' management to improve workers' well-being, increase wages and upskill the workers. Meanwhile, 12 Cupcakes co-founder Jamie Teo will be sentenced next month for failing to prevent the company from underpaying its foreign staff.
More than 2,000 BTO flats in the Bidadari estate have been completed, with over 70% of residents already in their new homes. These completed flats are spread across 3 projects: Alcove Vista, Alcove Lakeview and Alcove Courtview. Bartley Green Rise will be Bidadari's last BTO site to be ready, estimated to be completed in the second quarter of 2025.
Well, before we go, Haryanto, I have a very pressing question to ask you. Are you a fan of Pokemon?
I am actually, and my favorite Pokemon is actually Bulbasaur. It's the green starter Pokemon from the original iteration.
Right. And since you're such a big fan, then perhaps I don't need to tell you that Pokemon will be celebrating its 25th birthday tomorrow with a virtual concert.
Which I will be catching for sure.
I don't expect anything less from you. Well, for more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below.
Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Have a good weekend and we'll see you next week.